Could you please state and spell your full name for the court record?
Okay. Iris Dalley Graff. Iris, I-R-I-S, Dalley, D-A-L-L-E-Y, Graff, G-R-A-F-F.
All right, thank you. Can you tell us about your current occupation and where you're currently employed?
I'm self-employed. My husband and I have a forensic training and consulting business.
What is the name of that business?
Graff Investigative and Forensic Training.
Thank you. How long have you been employed as a forensic analyst?
Basically going back to 1989, not all of it with the same employee.
Can you tell us a little bit about your employment history? Where else have you worked?
Well, in law enforcement, I began in 1989 with the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, where I was a sworn agent for the state. Began in the criminalistics division, people commonly refer to as the crime lab. I did crime scene investigation and forensic serology and microscopy. Trying to think what else. Eventually added to that bloodstain pattern analysis, trajectory and shooting analysis, forensic animation, graphics in analysis, a lot of things. Eventually focusing just as a crime scene agent, where I did just the crime scene investigation, everything associated with that, and without the additional bench work in the laboratory. Left that to be, when I retired from the Bureau after 20 years, then I was a member of another company that's a forensic consulting company until, I believe it was 2016 that we separated, and my husband and I have our own company.
All right. And that company that you worked for after the Bureau, what were your responsibilities there?
Well, in that company, I was one of the founding members of that company, and we did primarily analysis of crime scene information, especially bloodstain pattern analysis and shooting analysis, those kinds of things.
All right. Who were your clients in working for that company?
It was open. It was law enforcement or anyone who was interested, anyone who wanted assistance. So some of the clients were prosecutors, some were defense attorneys, some were individuals who something happened to someone and they wanted an expert opinion. So sometimes it was private individuals. We also did a lot of training, which I still do, and we have open enrollment, so anybody who wants to sign up for a class can. Most of our clientele there are law enforcement, however, have had attorneys, prosecutors, defense attorneys, defense investigators. We had a medical doctor in one, a coroner. So it's open to whoever wants to put forth the effort to be in the course and do the things we require.
Is that the same type of training you provide now through Graff Investigation and Training?
Yes.
All right. Do you teach anywhere else outside of the classes that you teach for your company?
Haven't been in recent years. Haven't been employed, like if you mean like a university or something like that. No.
Okay. But you had in the past, is that correct?
In the past, I was an adjunct professor at a university while I was also a public school teacher.
All right. Do you belong to any professional organizations?
Yes.
Which organizations do you belong to?
The International Association of Identification, which is the largest and oldest of the forensic professional organization. The International Association of Bloodstain Pattern Analysts. The Association for Crime Scene Reconstruction. The Rocky Mountain Division of the Bloodstain Pattern Analysis.
And let me ask you, have you held a board position with any of these organizations?
Yes.
And what was that position?
Well, with the International Association of Identification, I was on the crime scene certification board for a year. with the International Association of Bloodstain Pattern Analysis. I was president for 2 terms. With the Association of Crime Scene Reconstruction, I was the secretary for about a dozen years. I didn't keep track.
Okay, thank you. Have you ever testified as an expert before?
Yes,
All right, and have you testified in Fairfax County as an expert?
yes, I have.
All right. Can you tell me a little bit about bloodstain pattern analysis and how it fits within what you've described to us as your experience as a forensic analyst?
Well, blood stains are common in any violent scene. So we look at blood and what blood does. Blood is a fluid, as it is in its natural environment in your body. And as a fluid, we can look at it in terms of the science of fluid dynamics. What do fluids do? That's what blood does. So based on that, we do a lot of experimentation and things to see what blood does on specific surfaces with under specific types of forces applied to the blood. We look at all the characteristics of blood to include how blood moves, how it forms margins along the surface of a pattern, why that margin is formed that way, the consistency of blood and how that changes over time, what happens to blood, especially when it's airborne, and what shape it is in the air, and that because that determines what shape it will be on the target surface, so that when we see a blood stain on a target surface, we can determine, one, whether or not it was airborne, and if it was airborne, then we can determine something about how it formed this pattern and sometimes where it came from. So to identify the general trajectory of the blood from the source. And then, of course, combine that with things like the DNA analysis that tell us something about who the blood could or could not have come from.
So let me stop you there. With an understanding of how bloodstain pattern analysis fits into forensics, the education and work experience you've described for us, does that give you the ability to be an expert in bloodstain pattern analysis?
Yes.
Okay. Judge, at this time, I would offer Ms. Dalley Graff as an expert in bloodstain pattern analysis.
All right, Mr. Carroll, you wish to voir dire?
Your Honor, actually, I don't have any objection to her qualification as an expert in blood stain pattern.
I'm sorry. It's just the jury has trouble hearing
I
you.
apologize, Judge, I don't have an objection to her qualifications as an expert in blood stain pattern analysis.
All right, then so moved as an expert in that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so back to a little bit more about blood stains. Can you explain to us the different types of blood staining that we might see present at a crime scene? Flow, spatter, transfer. Can you tell us what those are?
Well, there are a lot of different end results of bloodshed, and they can sort of be categorized according to what the final blood stain looks like. But in doing the analysis, I look at all the characteristics of the stain and then see which mechanisms can be excluded. So, for example, as I've already referred to, if blood is airborne, the stains that will be created from that are going to be circular or elliptical. That's because blood in flight actually breaks into spheres as it leaves the source. Well, a sphere is circular, so if it hits a surface, that stain will be either circular or elliptical, depending on the angle. Then we look at a lot of others. By the way, that is called spatter, if it's circular and elliptical, and there are various things that will cause that. Another type is contact stains. That is, blood on one surface comes in contact with another surface. We call that a transfer because blood is transferred from one object to the other. And then depending on things like the volume of blood and the texture of the surfaces that come in contact with each other, the shape of the object, then the transfer may be actually a pattern that reflects the original surface. That will be, by the way, will be a surface stain. We also have to look at the surface itself. Is it absorbent? If it's absorbent, then blood as a fluid will diffuse along the fibers. It's called capillary action. So it may be somewhat distorted if it's an absorbent surface. If it's not an absorbent surface, well, then we look at those issues because now you're going to have a different look at the margins in particular. We look at contact stains that happen with motion, because if there's motion that pushes blood across the surface, one of the things that does is there's a displaced volume of blood, and you end up seeing little, what looks like lines through the pattern. We call those striations. That's an indication of movement. We can look at the overall pattern and see whether or not blood was on the surface and then that blood got moved, that something pushed the blood, or that blood is on some other surface that comes in contact with motion, in which case we call that a swipe. That is that some of the blood then will be transferred as it's in motion. Again, there will be striations because that's what shows us motion. And then that will have a displacement of volume, so the volume is not consistent all the way across there. Depending on the surface, there may be a really feathering at one end or the other, but you'll also have some places where the liquid blood forms a margin. And so you can see those are a little bit smoother edges, but across the pattern, sometimes you can tell generally the surface, what the surface was that pushed it onto the transferred surface. Flow is simply blood that's on a surface and it's under gravity. So if a blood drop or a volume of blood is on a non-absorbent surface, then gravity will cause that blood to go downward, whichever way down is. So that if it's on contours, it'll follow the contours, but always going down if it's flow. It will have generally parallel margins, generally a consistent volume of blood across from margin to margin until it gets to a stopping place, basically. That can be because it went down, say, going down a wall and hits the floor. And then you have a little pooling, depending on the volume. You may or may not have pooling, but you can see that it's associated with the flow. There are several types of contact patterns that can happen. So we look at it in the context of the scene. What do we know about the blood that's here? And we look at like the condition of the blood. If sometimes we look at drying times and how, if we know approximately when the blood shed, what does it look like now? Which means you also look at the metadata of the images to determine when was the image created. Is this an aberration of the delayed time in recording the image, or is it something that's actually part of what was originally there, and so forth? So it has to be taken in context of the scene.
Okay. Let's, for a moment, talk about cast-off as it pertains to spatter. What does that mean to you?
Well, cast-off is another form of actually spatter. It's circular and elliptical stains. Again, blood in flight will break up into spheres as it travels through the air. And if it comes off of a surface of some moving object, which is where the term cast off comes from, that some object with blood on it moves, blood comes off in a column, and because of the motion, you see it landing on the surface as a linear distribution. Characteristics you look at in the possibility of cast off is you're looking for circular elliptical stains with a progressive change in shape, so that if it hits at the surface at 90 degrees, it's going to be circular. If it hits at an angle, then it's going to be more elliptical. So if blood comes off of something that's moving, then you'll see this progressive change from circular to elliptical in some type of a linear distribution. So it can be a straight line or it can be a curved line, but clearly a line. So that would be a way that you look at to identify cast off.
Okay. Did you have the opportunity to review photographs, video, and objects from the scene of the crime that was created when Christine Banfield and Joseph Ryan were killed?
I did look at documentation specifically in the bedroom and items collected from that bedroom.
Okay. In your analysis, did you have the opportunity to look at the autopsy of Christine Banfield?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and did you make any observations of the 8 knife wounds that she sustained, the 2 cutting wounds and the 6 stab wounds?
Your Honor, I'd object to the observations from the ME's report.
All right, if you want to approach, let's
Sure. And Judge, I am going to ask the question a different way if
Okay.
it has the same objection. Ms. Dalley Graff, when you looked at the autopsy for Christine Banfield, did you have the opportunity to observe the injuries that were documented in the
Yes.
report? Okay. And did that information help to inform your opinion about the blood evidence that you observed in the bedroom through the photographs and documents you were provided?
Well, the autopsy report itself doesn't inform me as far as looking at the blood stains, the characteristics of the blood stains, and evaluating possible mechanisms for the blood stains. Another,
So then we'll move on from that. Talking about Joseph Ryan, in review of the autopsy of Joseph Ryan, as well as the photographs from the scene and the officer's body-worn camera videos, did you make any observations of the location of the blood on Joseph Ryan's face?
yes.
Okay. Judge, at this time, I would like to display Commonwealth's Exhibit. Sorry, give me just a moment. Your Honor, if I can have a moment, all of this was ready this morning.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have the connection for the HDMI to my computer? All right, Judge, I'd like to display Commonwealth's 238 to the witness and to counsel. And this would be admitted, this would be offered under seal.
All right, any objection to 230? It disappeared.
I know it disappeared because
Okay.
I have to,
All
I
right.
have to be creative here for just a moment.
Any objection to 238? Under seal? Yes, that's fine.
Ms. Dalley Graff, can you see the photograph that we're identifying as Commonwealth's 238 on your screen?
I do see a picture on the screen.
Okay, is that a still that you pulled from the officer's body-worn camera?
Yes, it is.
Okay, did you enhance the color in this photo?
I may have shifted the histogram to make things more visible. I don't recall specifically, but one of the things because part of what I do is analyze from video as well as from still images, and if things are in shadow, then you can simply shift the histogram to make them a little more visible, which also sometimes increases the contrast. But I didn't add to the color or detract from the color. I simply shifted to make more or less visible, and without seeing the video in its raw format, I couldn't tell you exactly whether any of that is in this particular image.
Okay. I see that there is a shadow on the right-hand side of the photo. If you had adjusted the histograph, would you still see that shadow, or would that have been removed?
Excuse me? I'm sorry. All of us have trouble hearing you when you did.
I would object to leading.
All right, leading,
Judge, I asked if she had adjusted, would the shadow be removed? It's a yes or no question. It doesn't suggest its answer.
a yes or no question would be leading, correct?
Not if it doesn't suggest the answer.
All right, I'll overrule the objection, go ahead. You can answer it, ma'am.
Okay.
Do you have an ask again?
Yeah, because I'm not sure what I've heard was a yes or no.
Sure. The shadow that we see to the right in this photograph, if you had adjusted the histograph, if I'm saying that correctly, would you still see the shadow?
In adjusting the histogram, some of the shadow, not necessarily all of it, is removed so that if there was a shadow, say, across the face, then it may be shifted just enough to reveal that without actually taking out all of the shadow.
Okay, but you did not change the color. Did you change the color of the blood in this photo?
I didn't.
Okay. Did you change the color of Mr. Ryan's skin in this photo?
No,
Did you change the positioning of his body in this photo
no,
or any of the objects around his body?
no.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, I'd offer the photo into evidence.
Any objection? If you want to approach, again, I need you to use.
Judge, if we can terminate the display. If you have it. I'm just going to move on, but I need to use it later. No, I need, like, can you get the actual frame? Thank you. All right. Judge, if I can have what I'd like to have identified as Commonwealth's 170 displayed to counsel and the witness. All right, so let's look at your figure 16. Embedded is the original photograph and then a photograph that you have made markings on, is that correct?
Yes,
Okay, do you recognize that photograph?
yes.
Okay. Judge, at this time, I would offer into evidence as Commonwealth's 170 under seal this item.
Any objection to this?
Yes, Your Honor. I'm happy to
Yeah, if you want to approach, that's fine.
approach.
All right, Judge, I'd like to cast to the witness and counsel what I would have identified as Commonwealth 171. Ms. Dalley Graff, do you recognize this photo?
Yes,
Okay. Is this the photo that you received from crime scene, specifically Fairfax County detectives, to perform your analysis?
this is one of the photographs that was included.
Okay. And I'm going to zoom in and take you over to the lower right-hand corner of the photograph. Are you able to see Mr. Ryan's face in the corner of the photograph?
Yes,
Okay. Judge, at this time, Commonwealth would offer, as Commonwealth 171, the original crime scene photograph, and we would offer that under seal.
Any objection to 171? All right, 171 under seal.
Okay. So, can you tell when this picture was taken relative to other pictures that you looked at in
yes,
terms of the progression of events?
yes.
Okay, and when was this picture taken?
What's your legal objection?
Foundation.
All right.
Judge, I asked if she could tell when, relative to the other pictures she has received, this photo was taken. I'd like to believe her answer is not going to be a time and date. It's going to be, again, relative to what else was occurring at the crime scene to explain the location that we see here.
I'm going to sustain the objection. Next
Okay,
question.
that's fine. What do you see on Mr. Ryan's hand
I'm sorry, on Mr. Ryan's.
in this photograph? What do you see on Mr. Ryan's hand?
Yes, the right hand is bagged.
Okay, and if I zoom back out, what is he laying on, as best you can tell?
I believe it's,
I'm sorry, Judge, I object. I don't think you can walk it through.
Your legal objection.
My objection is foundational. It's
Okay.
also leading.
All right, I'll sustain as to leading. Your next question.
Sure. All right, let's just talk about his face. What did you observe about Mr. Ryan's face and the blood on it?
that his blood, I'm sorry, his face is basically covered in blood. In this particular image, I'm looking especially at under the chin because the overall solid, if you will, blood pattern ends at the chin.
Objection, Your Honor. She's going beyond the scope of the question. She's asked, what did you notice about the?
I'll overrule that objection. Oh, okay, that's good.
Please continue.
So I see, in addition to the solid covering of blood over the face, that on the chin and down towards the neck, there are flows, multiple flows, and they are not all in the same direction. In particular, I see a flow coming from the heavier stained up on the face, going under the chin and toward the, from the left side towards the right side, and down kind of towards the right shoulder. And that would indicate a direction or an orientation at the time the flow occurred, because flows always go downward. I see some that are coming from the right side. If we go over to kind of in
Objection,
front
Judge,
of...
non-responsive to the question.
Judge, she's describing her observations of the blood flows. There are
Right.
several. She's working her way through those
Overruled.
observations.
Overruled, go ahead.
Please continue.
So I see a flow that's coming down from the face that appears relative to the body, pretty much vertical, that is going from just in front of the right ear, basically, and then coming down towards the neck, more to the center of the neck, so that would have been upright at one point. So those are two different directions, but there are multiple flows. And just as a point that only liquid blood flows, dry blood doesn't move. So at the time the blood was wet, that indicates that that portion of the head was in different positions. But each of those separately has to have occurred when the when that surface was more upright, that is, so that the blood flows down. So the direction of the flow was downward at the time the flow occurred.
Did you make any markings on your figure 16 that highlighted your observations?
I'm sorry, I don't know which is my figure 16.
Sorry.
but-
Let me do this, Judge, at this time, if we can remove the photograph from the display. And if I can cast to the witness and to counsel. Just one moment. Commonwealth's 170. Do you recognize this photo?
Yes,
Is this your figure 16?
yes,
And are the green markings those that you made to reference the things that you've just spoken about?
yes. I added the green arrows showing directionality of some of the flows.
All right, Judge, at this time, the Commonwealth would offer into evidence as Commonwealth's 170 under seal, figure 16.
All right, I'll sustain the objection.
All right. Judge, is the court's software working to be able to have Ms. Graff draw on the picture in front of
Yes.
her and then have it printed out?
Yes.
All right. Ms. Graff, turning back to what was admitted as Commonwealth's 171. If I can have that published to the jury. Sorry, just one second. It skipped ahead. Can you mark with your finger on the screen in front of you the location of the blood flow and the directionality that you just discussed?
Okay, there are multiple flows. So just to demonstrate, if this works. Ooh, sorry, it's very wide mark and the flow is very narrow. But for one, and then there's that's going from the chin, from the left side of the chin down towards the right. There's a second one that's somewhat parallel to the previous. Then there's from the, what I discussed before, from in front of the right ear going down. There's a couple of them there. There's a couple that are coming from the right cheek that are going a little bit to the left.
Okay, thank you. Judge, I would like to offer the marked photo into evidence as Commonwealth's 170.
What, I already have a 170. You want to make 172?
Uh,
Oh, wait, because you had showed a different picture for 170 with the marks already there.
Correct. So can we do that as 170A?
178? Okay.
Thank you.
You have to hit the print there. It's printing.
Sorry, Judge, there is not a print
It's,
button.
it's printing.
I'm sorry?
It's printing.
Okay.
Should be below you.
Yep. But I would let you know nothing is happening.
Okay. It takes a couple minutes, so you can go on to your next question.
Okay. All right, so if I can drop the display, please. Kelly, were you able to isolate?
And there's no objection to 170A, is that correct?
Just email it to me.
All right, 170A.
No objection.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's still not, it's blinking, but nothing's. Mhm. Kelly, is it in the shared drive? Can you just put it in the shared drive? Kelly. Wait a second. Where did you put it? You put it in. Which folder? Just in the folder that it was. Or in exhibits. It's where? It's not. It's not there. Okay. Find it. Judge, between the printer and the issue with this additional photo, I might request for 5 minutes
All
to,
right, well, we can go ahead and take our morning recess early. Is
Thank
that what
you.
you'd like to do?
yes,
Okay.
please.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and take a 15-minute recess so she can
Thank
get the
you.
pictures taken care of. Just don't talk to anybody about the case and don't do any outside research, okay? Thank you. All right, we'll come back at 11:10 then.
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, since you are you're testifying now, please don't discuss your testimony with anybody to include the prosecutors at this point, okay? Do you understand?
You said to include prosecutors?
Right, you can't talk to anybody about your testimony now because you're in the middle of your testimony.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. All right.
All rise, please.
And Your Honor, just to clarify, your clerk let me know we could try 170A again.
Okay, that's fine. All right, your next question then?
All right, thank you. We're going to try that again, Ms. Dalley Graff. Your Honor, this is Commonwealth's admitted under seal 170. Ms. Dalley Graff, this is the picture that you drew on just a
No,
moment ago,
I think that's 171, just to let you know for the record, this is
Thank you.
171.
171.
Okay.
Ms. Dalley Graff, you drew on this photo a moment ago, and we marked that as 170A. We're going to try that again with what appears to be hopefully a smaller line on your screen. Can you, reminding the jury what we were talking about, the blood flow on Mr. Ryan's neck, can you identify with the marker on your screen where you see blood flow and in what direction?
There are multiple flows, and if I can show, just going across, beginning on the right side, this will show. So there's downward from the chin towards the neck, and then there's from the chin towards the right shoulder. And then there's downward from sort of in front of the right ear down towards the neck.
All right, thank you. And what did the different direction of the flows indicate to you?
That there were different positions while the blood was wet and flowing.
Thank you. Judge, I would offer the marked photo as new Commonwealth's 170A unless it needs to be marked as B.
No, 178 is fine.
Okay.
Is that, any objection to that? 178, it's going to replace the other 170A. Right, 170A, 170A. All right.
Thank you. And if the clerk could print, I'll pass it up. Thank you. All right. If we can drop the screen. And if we can publish Commonwealth's 241 to the witness and counsel. All right, Ms. Dalley Graff, do you recognize this clip from body worn?
Yes.
Okay. Judge, at this time, I would offer into evidence as Commonwealth's 241 under seal.
Any objection? You want to approach? Here's your approach. All right, 241 is in evidence under seal.
All right, so looking at this photo, what did you notice about Mr. Ryan's hand position from this body worn camera of Officer Beckner, previously admitted as Commonwealth 6?
In the body cam, we see Mr. Ryan laying supine or on his back with both arms, forearms across his chest, the right hand partially overlaying the left hand.
Okay, and are his hands over the location? Well, let me ask you this. Did you have a chance to review the shirt that was provided as physical evidence in this case?
I reviewed the images of the shirt in this
Okay.
case.
And did you, in your review of the images, observe a defect in the shirt?
Yes.
Okay, the circular hole, was it a circular hole from the,
Objection leading.
sure.
All right, sustained.
What defect did you observe in the shirt?
There was a defect, a somewhat circular hole through the shirt. It could be located based on looking at the shirt and on there's actually an imprint on the shirt of some individuals, and you can locate it relative to those individuals, and other markings on the shirt helped to identify where it was located.
Okay, and did the defect in the shirt line up with any defect in Mr. Ryan's body based on your observation of the photos?
Objection to foundation, Judge.
Overruled. Okay.
Based on comparison of the information from autopsy images at the autopsy and looking at the shirt, the defect in the shirt appeared to be consistent with the location of the defect or the gunshot wound to the chest.
All right, and in this photograph that we have here, this still image from the body-worn camera, Commonwealth 241, are Mr. Ryan's hands over the defect in the shirt made by the bullet that struck him in the chest?
Well, looking at the image, you can't see any of those figures that I just described as being part of the imprint on the shirt, that the left hand is overlaying that, and therefore it would be overlaying the defect.
Thank you. All right. Judge, if we can remove the image. Ms. Dalley Graff, I'm going to ask if the court could please display to the witness and to counsel Commonwealth's 172. All right, Ms. Dalley Graff, do you recognize this photo?
Yes.
All right, and if I can show the witness Commonwealth's 173. Do you recognize this photo?
Yes.
And going back to 172, Judge, the Commonwealth would offer this into evidence under seal.
Any objection to 172? 172 under seal.
And I would ask that be published to the jury. And we're going to toggle back and forth if we can. I'd offer at this time, Judge, Commonwealth's 173. It need not be sealed.
All right, 173, any objection? All right, 173 in evidence.
And I'd ask that be published to the jury.
In the gallery.
All right, so resting on this photo, what observations did you make of Joseph Ryan's right hand?
That there's transfer blood stain on his right hand.
Okay. Did you notice anything on his arm?
There's also some transfer on his arm, just below the wrist.
And if I can ask you about the palm, what about this contact transfer bloodstain pattern on the right palm did you observe?
The transfer is across the inside of the palm, which would be consistent with the palm being exposed at the time, or the hand being open.
Okay. And if I can toggle back to 172, removed from the gallery view.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Tell me what you noticed about the transfer pattern on the outside of the right hand. And I'm sorry, this is the left hand. Nope, this is the right hand. What did you notice about the transfer pattern on the outside of the right hand?
Okay, if I understand, you're talking about the pinky side of the right hand, that there's transfer, it appears to go around the hand, across the back, and around that side of the hand.
Okay,
And it's also on the fingers, and the pinky, the small finger, is basically covered.
okay. What did you notice about the spaces in between the fingers?
That if we look at the first and second fingers, the index finger and the middle finger, you can see a line of demarcation. That is, there's a line that you can see that there's blood on one side and not blood on the other side.
And what does that mean?
That something shielded the blood so that it didn't go on that unstained side, such as if the fingers are simply held together at the time that the blood is deposited, then the blood would not get between the fingers.
Okay, so you're holding your hand up for the jury with your fingers closed together, is that correct?
Yes, with the fingers fairly tight, fairly close together, side by side. So that would obstruct blood from going between the fingers. So if blood is coming across, then it will be on the back of the fingers. But where that skin is in contact would leave this line of demarcation, the place that blood was blocked from going.
Okay, thank you. And again, back to 173, when looking at the palm, do you see those same lines of demarcation? It's helpful to zoom in.
The same lines of demarcation are not visible in this photograph.
All right, and how did you describe the blood transfer to this part of the hand?
It's a transfer, something wet with blood.
Sorry, Your Honor.
Or what's your objection?
I don't think that she's previously described it, and may we approach?
Yes.
Okay, so Ms. Dalley Graff, I think we were talking about the contact transfer onto the palm of the hand.
Yes.
Just to reset us, can you describe how that stain was created on the hand?
Some surface wet with blood was in contact with the hand, so that blood transferred from the wet, bloody surface to the hand.
All right, thank you. And Judge, if we can remove the display. And Judge, if you would, supposing the next objection, I would ask this photo be shared with counsel and with the witness. Do you recognize this photograph?
I do.
Okay. And did you make markings on this photograph to highlight the areas that you just explained to the jury?
I did.
So Judge, rather than having her draw again on the photograph, I would offer this photo as Commonwealth's 174.
Any objection?
Yes, Judge, I do have an objection to the markings.
No, I'll sustain the objection.
All right, then we'll go back to Commonwealth's 172. If you could, mark on your screen where you observe the voids on Mr. Ryan's fingers.
The lines of demarcation and the portion that's not bloodstained be where there was a blockage between the fingers.
All right, Judge, I would offer this marked photo into evidence as 174A.
Under seal.
Yes, please.
Any objection?
No objection to that,
All
Your
right,
Honor.
under seal, 174A.
And Judge, if we can take that down. Commonwealth's 173. Previously admitted, if we can have that published. Ms. Dalley Graff, on this photograph, can you indicate where you see transfer of blood stain on the arm,
On the
wrist?
on the right arm, in the area inside the green marks.
And Judge, I would offer the marked photo as Commonwealth's 174B.
All right, any objection?
No objection.
174B.
And that does not need to be under seal.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so if we can take that down. And Judge, I'd ask that Commonwealth's 175 be shared with the witness and with counsel. Ma'am, do you recognize this photo?
Yes,
All right, and is this Joe Ryan's left hand?
yes.
Okay, what observations did you make of the blood stains on his left hand?
That he has primarily transfer across the back of his left hand with some volume so that there's associated flow.
All right. Did you make note of a line of demarcation?
Yes,
Okay, and where is that?
Do you wish to offer this in evidence?
I'm sorry, yes, Your Honor, I apologize. I'd offer an evidence, Commonwealth's 175.
Any objection to 175?
No objection.
All right, 175 in evidence.
All right, and if that can be published.
All right.
All right, so you know what, before you mark, let's talk about the rest of the hand so we can see it clearly. What other observations did you make of the blood stains on Mr. Ryan's left hand?
Well, there's also transfer on his left thumb and sort of laterally, just below the left wrist. And also note that there's some volume to include what appears to be blood clots on the transfer.
Okay. And can you now mark on Commonwealth's 175 the line of demarcation and the transfer that you just mentioned?
Transfer across the left, back of the left hand, from the green line towards the fingers would be areas of transfer. Flow towards from that area towards the wrist. Then another transfer just below the left wrist. Transfer on the left thumb. Another small transfer on the outside of the left thumb.
Okay. Were you, in your review of the photographs in this case, able to determine if anything lined up with the void on Mr. Ryan's hand?
Judge, I'm going to object. I think that just the question itself goes to what we've talked about.
I'll sustain the
Okay.
objection.
That's fine.
Next question.
So tell us, much as you did with the right hand, how did this blood come to be on Mr. Ryan's left hand?
Some object wet with blood was in contact with the back of his left hand.
All right, thank you. Also looking at this photo, did you make any note of the blood stains on or around Mr. Ryan's jeans?
Yes,
What did you note?
that there are, excuse me, some contact stains or transfer stains on the jeans in various locations.
All right, can you identify where you noticed those blood stains on the jeans?
There's a transfer on the left front of the jeans. There's a transfer on the inside of the jeans waistband at the buttonhole.
Thank you. Did you review the certificates of laboratory analysis submitted in this case?
I did.
And whose DNA profile was present in the swabs of the blood from Joe Ryan's hands?
I believe there was a DNA profile from both Christine Banfield and Joseph Ryan.
All right. Judge, at this time, Commonwealth would offer Commonwealth's 175A as the marked item.
All right, any objection?
No objection.
All right, 175A.
All right, so looking back, and Judge, if we can drop video. Did you have the opportunity to fully review Officer Beckner's body-worn camera?
I reviewed several body-worn cameras. I don't recall who was wearing which camera. I would have to look that up in the record.
Okay, but if we can go back to Commonwealth 241 and have that published to the witness and counsel and the jury, it was under seal.
Yes, ma'am.
This is the still image that we were referencing before from Officer Beckner's body worn previously as admitted as Commonwealth 6. In your review of the video, did you observe the police officers at the scene to move Mr. Ryan's arms?
I did see that in a body cam video.
Okay. Did you observe those officers to touch Mr. Ryan's arm?
All right, I'll sustain as to leading.
Okay. I'm going to move on.
Okay.
All right, so looking at previously admitted Commonwealth's 123. And Judge, this was admitted under seal. If I can have it published to
Yes, ma'am.
the jury, the witness, and Mr. Carroll, and counsel on the left. Drawing your attention to Mr. Ryan's arm. Did you make any observations of the blood patterns on his left forearm?
Yes.
Okay, what did you observe?
I observed what appears to be small blood droplets on his arm in a somewhat linear distribution. Also observed transfer stains on his arm, in particularly 4 transfer stains that are roughly parallel to each other.
All right, so let's talk about them one at a time. Let's talk about the blood drops that you observed. Can you circle or highlight those items on your screen? Sorry about that. Okay. And how are those blood droplets formed?
These would be blood drops falling from somewhere above. Again, blood drops falling are under gravity, takes them down, and when they're circular, would mean that the blood is dropping straight down. So if it makes a circular stain, that surface was fairly horizontal at the time that the blood drops were deposited.
Okay, if the blood had been coming at him from an angle, what shape would they have taken?
But if it's coming at an angle, then that sphere in air would translate to an elliptical shape on the surface.
Okay. Judge, I would ask to print and admit this photo as Commonwealth's 170. Well, this, you want to do 123A and? That's fine, whatever you want. Nope, that's fine, 123A, keeps it clean. Yes, please.
Any objection?
Okay.
And if we could clear the markings, I can do it if you want, or I don't know if you, okay. All right. You spoke of a transfer pattern on the arm. Where do you see that transfer pattern? All right. Judge, if I can have this marked as Commonwealth 123B and printed?
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, be under seal.
Thank you. All right, and then I'm going to take you to a different angle. If I can remove the display, please. If we can share Commonwealth's previously admitted 101 with the witness, the jury, and I do not believe this was under seal, Judge, but I'll defer to the court.
101 is under seal.
Okay, then this remains under seal. Ms. Dalley Graff, if I zoom in a little bit, we've got another angle here. Can you again highlight the transfer pattern that you observed? Okay, thank you. And I would offer that marked photo as Commonwealth's 101A under seal.
I guess, Judge, the markings are actually covering up what she's testified to as transfer. Okay, I just want to make sure there's no other connotation given to the way that was drawn. In having a circle would probably be a,
I understand that's what she did.
okay,
I mean, we talked to her cross-examination about it. You have the original picture, look at what she marks.
okay, thank you, Your Honor.
So no objection.
No objection.
Are you able to tell us whether or not the transfer pattern was made at the same time as the drip marks?
Objection, Your Honor. Foundation.
Based on your training and experience, are you able to discern anything about the markings in this photograph that would enable you to gauge whether or not they occurred at the same time?
To determine sequencing, you need to look very closely at individual photographs of this area, multiple photographs of this area, looking to see if we can see actual one stain on top of the other. If we can make that determination, then you know that the one that's on the bottom has to happen before the one on the top. So in this case, I don't think that I was able to actually pinpoint where one was on top of the other. They happen at different times. They're different mechanisms. Nothing here indicates that they were simultaneous. They may have been very close together in time. I don't know. But if you don't have those specific characteristics to point to, then you don't determine sequencing.
All right, thank you. If we can pull this photo down. Judge, I'd like to have 181 displayed to the witness and counsel. Do you recognize this photograph?
Yes.
Judge, I would offer 181 under seal.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, 181 under seal.
And I apologize, we're bouncing all around in the numbers. All right. Ms. Dalley Graff, I've zoomed in, and I'd like to have this published now to the jury. This is another view of those same transfer stains, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. What can you tell me about what is happening on the interior of the arm at the base of those stains?
There is a flow pattern on the interior of the arm. It extends from the transfer pattern, what would be up the arm, that is towards the elbow, and then terminates in one stain.
All right. Can you tell me about how the blood moved down the arm to create that stain?
It appears that excess
Judge,
volume
I would
of blood
object. I
was in the
think that's-
transfer.
Excuse me, hold on.
I'd object. I think that's exceeding the scope of what blood spatter analysis that we discussed.
You want to
Okay, let's try again. The blood that you see from the transfer, how does that come to be or to connect to the blood that we see on the interior of the forearm?
That excess volume in the transfer was flowing what would have been downward at the time in sort of toward the inner aspect of the forearm. And when a liquid drop meets a liquid drop, they merge, and then they all flow together. And this only goes a short distance, so you can see where it terminates on
Why?
the inside of the arm.
What would have limited its distance?
Well, a limited volume for one. It's probably no more than just a really small volume from each of those transfers, just enough that it's fluid enough to flow, and as they merge together, then continue together in one flow. The blood loses energy, partly because it's leaving volume behind. There may have been more resistance on the surface at this point. They change in position, that it flows here, and now you change position, so it stops because it's no longer downward.
All right, and that takes me to my next question. Tell me what you would be able to say about the position of the arm when the blood was flowing based on gravity.
Well, flow again is always in the direction of gravity or downward, so that means that the forearm was in some raised position so that downward would be towards the elbow instead of towards the wrist.
Thank you. Is it possible that that flow led to the transfer?
Objection, Your Honor. It's leading.
Overruled. I'll allow that question.
Well, flow doesn't become transfer. If it's flow, it's going to keep going in the direction of gravity until it loses volume or something causes it to stop. It doesn't separate. That is, blood has cohesive properties, has surface tension that holds the fluid together, which is partly why, that's part of the reason why blood in flight is a sphere. It's pulling together. So you would need something to break those forces to cause part of the flow to go one direction and part another direction. And there's nothing here that would do that. That's not what flows do on their own. They just go with gravity. And you see that if you have a flow going one direction and you turn that surface, the flow doesn't separate into separate flows. The whole thing, one flow can make a corner, but that corner would be an indication that the thing was oriented so that what was down is now a different direction.
Thank you. Judge, if we can take down picture.
Yes, ma'am.
If I can have you take a look at Commonwealth's previously admitted 100, which was admitted under seal. Do you recognize this photo?
Yes.
Okay. Judge, at this time I would have it published to the jury.
It is.
Thank you. All right. What observations did you make in conjunction with your reading of Commonwealth's admitted 151, the lab from DLI, about Mr. Ryan's pants and any blood stains observed there?
My recollection of the analysis was that both profiles, DNA profiles from Christine Banfield and DNA profiles from Joseph Ryan, were found in stains on the jeans.
All right. Let's talk about them one by one. Specifically, did you examine the area in the photo of the button and the zipper?
There was a sampling from that area that I read the DNA analysis report for that sample.
Okay. And that sample of blood, were you able to determine if it was a flow, spatter, or transfer?
The stains on the area of the button and the buttonhole were contact stains or transfers.
All right. Looking at, if I may advance to Commonwealth's previously admitted 101. Slightly better angle. Did you make observations of other bloodstain patterns now on the leg of the jeans?
Yes.
All right, tell me about your observations on his right leg pant, right pant leg.
Well, there are several bloodstain patterns or blood stains on the right leg. In particular, there's a stain pattern of somewhat parallel transfers that are finger-like in shape.
And can you mark on 101 where you've made that observation or which transfers you're referencing? Okay. And in your review of what was previously admitted as Commonwealth's 168, the certificate of laboratory analysis from Bodie, was there a mixture of DNA found in that blood?
My recollection is that this is another area where both profiles were found in the stain that was sampled in this area.
And you say both profiles of?
The profile from Christine Banfield and the DNA profile from Joseph Ryan.
Okay. And again, could these stains be cast off or spatter?
No,
Could they be falling blood?
no.
I'm going to move on to,
Did you want that in evidence?
yes, please, if we could have that printed, and I would offer it as Commonwealth's 101A,
I already have 101A. Do you want
101B.
101B under
Thank
seal?
you.
No objection, okay. 101B under seal.
All right, if we can take that down. And if I can have Commonwealth's 222 shared with the witness and with counsel. All right, do you recognize this photo?
Yes,
And did you examine Mr. Ryan's, this photo of Mr. Ryan's hip?
yes.
Okay. Judge, at this time, I would offer the item into evidence. It's Commonwealth's 222.
All right, any objection? All right, 222 in evidence, not under seal, correct?
Not under seal.
Okay, 222.
All right, so this angle is a little tricky, but tell me what you observed about the blood stains on Mr. Ryan's hip.
There are multiple circular and elliptical stains, most of them fairly small, that are on the front and the side of the left hip.
All right, let's see if we can zoom in a little bit more. This larger stain that is now in the middle of the photo for reference, tell me what you observe about that stain.
This is a larger stain. It appears to have some satellites, that is secondary blood drops. So when wet blood hits the surface, it can form droplets out of that volume, and it's called satellites, secondary stains. And they appear to be possibly a little flow associated with it, and that flow, as you're looking at it, would be from front to back.
All right, so again, using gravity as our rule, what position was the body in when that stain struck the hip?
I would object, based on this photo.
Sorry.
I would object to scientific foundation in order to even, that we have some sort of scientific foundation
So
before. there's
foundation
any-
is your objection?
Yes.
All right, so if you want to lay a foundation.
Sure. To your knowledge, how does gravity work?
Gravity is a magnetic pull towards the center of the earth, and it causes things under the force of gravity, to move toward the center of the earth or downward.
Okay. And the blood that we see in this picture, in what direction did it flow?
The small flows that appear to emanate from the larger are front to back in reference to the body, and here going towards the floor.
All right. And so in what position would the body have been relative to the earth when the blood struck the body and flowed?
That his left hip was exposed when the wet blood contacted the skin and flowed towards the back or towards the floor.
Thank you. Let's zoom back out just a little bit. Looking at these droplets of blood, what can you tell me about that pattern?
There are small circular to elliptical stains which indicate blood was in flight when the blood made contact with this part of his skin.
All right, thank you. So let's move on then to what was previously admitted as Commonwealth's 133. All right, if I can have that displayed to the witness and counsel.
It's already been.
And it's admitted, so to the jury as well, please.
In the gallery, thank you.
Thank you, and the gallery. All right, Ms. Dalley Graff, tell me about the blood stains that we observe on Mr. Banfield's jeans, previously admitted Commonwealth's 133.
If we're looking at generally the area of the knees, that there are multiple contact stains.
All right, were you able to determine whether or not those contact stains, strike that, let me rephrase. Did you have the opportunity to watch, as you've said before, the body-worn camera, specifically any portion where first responders are entering the room?
Yes,
Okay, and did you observe Mr. Banfield's position on that body-worn camera when first responders entered the room?
when first officers entered the bedroom, yes.
Okay. Was his position consistent with the transfer patterns that you see on the knees of the jeans?
In the,
I'd object to that. There has to be some indication of what. There has to be more in order to be able to arrive at the conclusion that she's asking for, not just looking at the body cam.
You want to approach for a second?
All right, so at the knees, we have transfer stains, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Zooming in, tell me about these stains on the left of our screen that appear different.
Yes, there's linear distributions of circular and elliptical stains. This would be on the jeans above the knee, going up to pretty much the top of the jeans.
Okay, and again, remind us how elliptical stains come to be.
Elliptical stains occur when the sphere of blood traveling through the air comes in contact with the surface at an angle so that the circular shape of the sphere translates into an elliptical shape on the surface.
Thank you. Judge, if we can take this down
All right.
and move to Commonwealth's 135. If I can have this published, this is Commonwealth's previously admitted 135.
All right.
Is this a close-up on those stains?
This is a close-up of some of those stains.
Some of, that's fair. All right. And if I can have the court's indulgence, pull this down for just 1 second.
Yes, ma'am.
If I can show you Commonwealth's previously admitted 186 and have that published.
I don't have a 186 in evidence.
All right, Commonwealth would offer 186 into evidence.
Any objection to 186?
No, you're.
All right, 186 in evidence.
All right, so here we have the same genes in a manner that Detective Leach photographed them to allow us to see the blood more closely. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so if you can describe your opinion or share with us your opinion about the blood spatter that we see on the left.
There are linear distributions of small circular elliptical stains. They're actually from about the knee to the crotch, and just bracketed to show that general area.
All right, and are those stains cast off?
These stains could be cast off. They're consistent with cast off. We see some progressive change in shape looking across some of the lines. So cast off cannot be excluded as a mechanism to produce these stains.
Thank you. And were you able to review the certificate of laboratory analysis that was admitted in this case, identifying the DNA contribution to those stains?
Yes,
And do you recall whose DNA was found to be in those stains?
the DNA profile of Christine Banfield was found in this area.
Thank you. All right, Judge, if we can pull that down. Judge, at this time, I would offer into evidence is Commonwealth's 187.
Any objection to 187?
No objection.
All right, 187 in evidence.
All right. Ms. Dalley Graff, from 187, were you able to make any observations about Mr. Banfield's shoes?
Yes,
And I'm going to ask council to take a look, if we can pull this down. We can display Commonwealth's 188 to counsel and the witness. Is this a photograph that you pulled from Commonwealth's 187 to highlight the blood stains that you analyzed?
Yes, this actually shows parts of two different photographs, but I took out the background to focus on just the shoes and the stains on the shoes.
All right, Judge, at this time, the Commonwealth would offer as Commonwealth's 188.
Any
this
objection?
photograph,
No objection.
188 in evidence.
and we'd ask that it be published to
That's
the
fine.
jury in the gallery. All right, tell me about the staining that you observed on Mr. Banfield's shoes.
Well, on the right shoe, where you see the one closest is the right shoe, and then the one where you're looking down at the toe area of the right shoe, there are circular stains, particularly up close to where the shoelace loops. You can see a circular stain moving out into the toe, a circular stain. On the side of the right shoe, there's a larger stain that can't be determined. It could be just a contact with something wet with blood, or it could be merging where if it's blood falling there on the side, then as it traveled in the fabric actually made one larger stain. So the mechanism cannot be determined. The left shoe appears to be a transfer from some area of wet blood.
Is the blood stain or the blood stains on the right shoe, is that consistent with transfer, or could it be consistent with transfer?
Well, there are in particular two that are very circular. So when I do the analysis, I look at all of the pictures, all of the images in context to see if I could identify if this is transfer, then there should be a circular area somewhere of that approximate size and shape to see if I can exclude transfer, because this does appear to be a somewhat absorbent surface. I didn't find anything, so it appears more that it falling blood, because falling blood will make a circular stain.
Thank you. And did you make any observations from your review of the body-worn camera of Mr. Banfield's hands following the entry of law enforcement into the room?
Yes,
What did you notice about his hands?
both hands were blood covered.
All right. I can show you what has been previously admitted as Commonwealth's 112 and 113. We'll start with 112. All right. So, in your review of the bloodstains found on the carpet, did you make any observations regarding these stains found between the bed and the basket?
Yes.
Okay, and what were your observations?
Well, there are multiple blood stains between the bed and the basket. Some of those appear to be saturation, where a lot of blood absorbed into the surface. Some appear to be simply transfer, that something that was very wet with blood is in contact with the surface. Others are much smaller stains. They appear to be circular to elliptical in shape.
Okay, so
Not-
let's start with this
No.
photo if we can. I know there's a whole lot more, but let's take it little bit by little bit. Identifying this stain here at the bottom of the photo, irregular in shape, what type of stain is that?
It appears to be both transfer and saturation.
Okay. were you able to identify anything that might have matched with the shape and pattern of that stain to have created the transfer?
I could not determine what transferred that particular pattern.
Okay, were there any objects that you observed in any of the photos nearby that were also saturated with blood?
Yes.
Okay, what did you observe?
Well, in particular, there was bedding that was over this area when officers first arrived, and some of that had a fairly heavy amount or large areas of saturation within that bedding that was sort of crumpled or on the floor above this area.
Okay, let's turn to look at the dots of blood here closer to the laundry basket. What can you tell us about that staining?
That from this image, there no particular dispersion or irregular dispersion, but there are very small blood stains in the area, especially as you're approaching up to the laundry basket.
Okay, and from your review of the certificates of analysis, was Joseph Ryan's DNA present in that tested area?
Yes.
Okay. If I can pull this down for just a moment. I'm going to ask Commonwealth 191 be shared with counsel and the witness. Do you recognize this photo?
Yes.
Okay. And the yellow circles on the photo, how did they come to be?
I put the circles on the photo.
Okay. Judge, at this time, the Commonwealth would offer this into evidence as Commonwealth 191.
I'd object to the markings, Judge.
All right, I'll sustain the objection.
All right. If I can have this pulled down, please. All right, directing your attention then to Commonwealth's previously admitted 113. Do you recognize this photo?
Yes.
All right, and just for orientation, is this the bed frame that we have on the right of the screen?
Yes, that would be the sideboard of the bed frame.
Okay. Tell me about the large blood stain that we have here. And Judge, I'm sorry if I did not ask that this be published.
It is published.
Okay, thank you. Tell me about that large saturation stain.
Overall, it's an indication of volume of blood that's on the surface, and I certainly would want to look under that area to see how much volume might be there. It also has, especially on the margins, you're looking to the right side, you can see the outlines of, or the shape that is fairly circular in a linear distribution. Looking at the photograph going from the top down towards the bottom, you see these, there appear to be individual circular stains.
Okay, can you, as best you can, using the screen, identify the linear pattern that you see? Okay, and can you draw perhaps either an arrow toward or a circle around the circular stains that you see? I'm afraid the circle around may end up too large, but
Yeah.
let's give it a try.
I'm sorry, the width of the line makes it
I know, thank you.
kind of obliterate the circle underneath.
All right, thank you. And again, what is it that the nature of the circular stains mean to you?
Taken together with the volume, that This appears to be where a volume of blood was projected, blood drops traveling through the air, and some of those droplets fell from that trajectory down to the surface of the, in this case, the carpet. So that creates the linear portion of it in association with the volume that you see immediately to the left of that the same thing is happening there. Droplets falling on top of droplets creates a volume and on an absorbent surface, a saturation. All of that is consistent with what's called a projected pattern, where a volume of blood pushed through the air, then the droplets fall, and they fall on top of each other, creating this larger overall pattern.
Thank you. If we can pull this down, please.
You don't want to print that?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
You have to put it back.
If we could print, and I would offer it as 113A.
Okay. I think it's
It moves.
off on the side.
Hold on, I can make it happen. Or not.
Okay.
Okay.
And any objection to 113A?
No.
113A evidence.
All right. Are we good? Okay, just wait.
You're fine.
Okay, thank you. All right. All right, if I can share Commonwealth's previously admitted 111. All right. For location purposes, Commonwealth's 113 was a close-up of which area of the staining that we see here?
It's approximately parallel to the sideboard.
All right, can you make a mark, just perhaps a dot on the screen for that stain?
I'm sorry, the previous pattern is what I just marked.
Oh, thank you. I can't see it on mine. All right, and so looking at the area of blood below that stain, what can you tell me about those markings?
Well, looking on the photograph, looking below the area that I just marked, there's at least two areas of concentration that are, as you're looking at the photograph, just below and another just to the left. These are somewhat overlaying. They indicate, there's an indication of volume. These are not, it's not just single falling blood. It's definitely not cast off or impact spatter. It's not flow. It's just areas of concentration and saturation.
And can you perhaps just put a dot in the centers of those two concentrated areas? Okay, thank you. So in the perimeter around those concentrated areas, what observations did you make of the staining?
But if I understand, we're talking about going around that general area. Again, there's multiple things that could move some of the blood in that area. Some of it could be transfer. That is something that's very wet with blood, could be on the surface, possibly moved from one place to the other or moving on the surface. I can't really tell. There appears to be multiple things happening. It's just I can't identify just one and only one action in that location.
Okay, well, let me ask this. If you were to draw a perimeter around the outermost edges of the blood staining that we see on the left, would the entirety of the blood contained within that perimeter be saturation?
It's not all saturation, doesn't
Okay.
appear to be.
what else does it appear to be?
Well, again, some of it could be transfer,
Okay.
like something very bloody, either being moved in different location or moved on the carpet, either one. So it's not an even distribution through that whole area.
Okay. And looking at the blood stain now to the right of the photograph, what can you tell us about that stain?
That there is saturation there, there is some transfer there. There is what might be some spatter up as you're looking at the general area. There's some smaller stains at least up just above and slightly to the right of center of the larger bloodstain area in front of that chest of drawers.
Thank you. And Judge, if I can have this printed and offered into evidence as 111A.
Any objection? 111A.
Let me know when I can pull it down.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. All right, Judge, if I can offer, well, if I can ask first that Commonwealth 219 be shared with the witness and with counsel. And Judge, at this time, I would offer Commonwealth 219 into evidence.
Any objection? Yes, so that's the marking, so I'll sustain the objection.
All right.
That would be under seal. Even though it's not omitted.
Judge, at this time, I'd ask Commonwealth 221 be shared with the witness and with counsel.
221.
All right, Ms. Dalley Graff, do you recognize this photo?
Yes.
All right. This time, Commonwealth would offer 221 into evidence under seal.
Any objection? All right, 221 in evidence under seal.
All right, Ms. Dalley Graff, we've got now another angle of the blood on the carpet that we've talked about. Can you identify for us the droplets that you previously testified to having come from Joe Ryan on the carpet near the laundry basket?
Well, there's an area that on the carpet that has smaller circular and elliptical stains between the bed and the basket.
Thank you. And then did you also observe any blood stains on the wall?
Yes.
All right, and can you circle where those stains were observed to be?
Sorry, the marking covers up.
It's okay, we're gonna zoom in on it in just a moment. Judge, I would offer this as Commonwealth's 221A. I'm sorry, this is 221?
Yes, 221A.
And now 221A with the markings, please.
Any objection? 221A under seal. Okay.
Let me know when I can pull it down, thank you.
Yes, you're fine.
I can ask to share with the witness and with counsel. Commonwealth's previously admitted 118.
118.
And that can be shared with the jury in the gallery as well.
Yes.
Ms. Graff, do you see here now a closer picture of the blood on the wall?
Yes.
All right. Tell me about that blood stain and what observations you made.
Well, the largest blood stain you see is clearly elliptical with some excess flow or a tail, a part of the volume that continued in the direction the blood drop was originally traveling when it impacted the wall. So this droplet was traveling downward and at a slight angle as you're looking at the wall, slightly to your right. There are other stains in the same area that are much smaller, but exhibit very similar characteristics. That they're the leading edge, the place where the blood droplet first met the wall, is rounded, and then you see that round shape transferring into elliptical. And those drops are all going toward the wall and then downward.
And you reviewed the certificate of laboratory analysis for that particular item, swab 39, is that correct?
I did.
All right, and did that contain Joseph Ryan's DNA profile?
I really would have to look at the report again. I don't recall.
Okay, that's all right. Did you make any observations regarding the blood spatter that was located on the laundry basket?
I did.
All right. Judge, at this time, I would ask to share Commonwealth's previously admitted 120.
120, okay.
Tell me about the blood stain patterns that you observed on the laundry basket.
Well, there are multiple circular and elliptical stains. Some of those appear to be in a linear distribution, with the caveat that the side of the laundry basket has a lot of openings, so you don't have the full pattern there, but some of them do appear to be in linear distribution.
And we understand that linear distribution is consistent with what?
Well, you get linear distributions in projected stains, in cast-off stains, in impact spatter. All of those would have some linear components to them.
Thank you. And were those stains swabbed and tested as item 41 to your knowledge?
Yes, some of these stains were submitted for further analysis.
All right, and was Christine Banfield's DNA present in some of those stains to your knowledge?
Some of them had Christine Banfield's DNA profile.
Okay, thank you. All right, Judge, if we can pull this down. Judge, at this time, I would offer into evidence Commonwealth's 196.
Any objection to 196? Is that a no? No. Okay, no objection. 196 in evidence, then thank you.
Judge, I'd ask that be published. All right, Ms. Dalley Graff, do you recognize this picture of Mr. Ryan's backpack?
This is an examination picture of the backpack that was under or partially under Mr. Ryan's left leg.
All right, so this is after it has been opened and spread out, is that correct?
Yes, this will be an examination where everything has been removed, photographed separately, and now looking at just the backpack alone.
Okay, so start us off with the thing that seems to confuse almost everyone. The circle that we see in the middle of the backpack, is that something you drew?
No,
Okay, to your knowledge, is that stitching on the backpack?
I can't tell from this photograph. I'd have to see a close-up. Oh, yes, I can see the stitches.
Okay, there we go. All right, so tell me about the blood stains that you observed on this object.
Multiple circular and elliptical stains.
All right, and what pattern of travel are those stains consistent with?
Well, some of them have some satellite or the continuation from the leading edge outward, which would indicate downward relative to looking at the photograph. Others are pretty indistinct. You can't really determine from some of them what they were, but all of this is relative to this surface.
All right, Judge, if we can pull this
right.
down. All right, and Judge, if I can share what was previously admitted as Commonwealth's 124.
124 under seal.
So, Ms. Dalley Graff, did you examine this photo relative to the one that we just shared and admitted into evidence as Commonwealth's 196?
Yes.
All right, so tell me what observations you made of the staining on the backpack as it appears in this picture relative to 196.
Well, I look at it in the context of the scene, how it was originally photographed before it was moved by officers in the scene, and to identify the patterns or the shapes of the stains that we could see in the examination photograph compared to what is visible here, to see if we can see the entire pattern or the portion of the pattern, to determine if the blood is deposited while it's in the orientation, location, everything that we see in this image, just by comparing those stains during examination quality and the in-scene context.
Okay, and what did your examination reveal regarding the location of these stains and the location of the items in the bag?
Well, one of the largest of the stains that we saw in the previous photograph, you can see a portion of it going into a fold as you're looking down at the lining as it was laying there when they first photographed it in place.
Okay, and is that consistent with the location of the objects in the bag as we see them photographed here?
I'm not sure I understand the question. We're
Okay.
talking about just the lining?
Yes.
Well, it appears that at least part of that lining is not exposed when we look at the overall shape of that. So we
Judge, I'm
see only
sorry.
part of that
I'm
shape
going to
here.
object to that question that we approach.
I'll sustain the objection. Just ask the next question.
Okay. Is the location of the items as we see them photographed here consistent with the stains that are beneath them?
Objection,
All right,
Judge.
sustain the objection.
Okay. Was there staining on the items as they are photographed here that created a pattern with the staining on the lining of the bag as evidenced in 196?
Judge, I'd object. I don't know. Well, actually, I'll see if she can
All
answer.
right, I'll overrule the objection.
There are some small stains on some of the items. However, what I'm looking for is to see, can I see the entire pattern that was on the lining with these objects in place? If all of that staining happened with these objects in place, then we should see those
Judge, I think
stains.
I would object. I think we're going to
All right, I'll
where-
sustain the objection. Next question.
Okay. Based on your review of the certificates of analysis, was Mr. Ryan's DNA observed in the stains to the liner of the backpack?
My recollection is those were the DNA profile of Joseph Ryan.
In your review of the body-worn camera, were you able to make any observations regarding the placement of the Glock 19M, Mr. Banfield's service weapon, at the time of the officer's first entry into the primary bedroom?
Yes.
Okay. And where was the Glock Model 19M?
on the, I believe that'd be the southeast corner of the mattress.
All right, and did you make any observations of the blood pattern in the area of the weapon?
On the weapon itself, on the pistol, there was what appeared to be contact all along that entire side of the gun.
When you say that side of the gun, which side of the gun?
The side that was up as it's laying on the mattress.
Okay. In your expert opinion, based on the location of the blood on Mr. Ryan's hand, the location of the blood on his pants, the location of the blood stains on his hip, and your review of all of the evidence in this case, including the autopsy reports, are you able to opine as to whether or not Joseph Ryan was in the position where he was found when police arrived, when those blood stains were transferred?
Objection, Your Honor.
All right,
I think this goes.
Approach.
I do not have any further questions. Thank you so much. I appreciate your patience.
All right, cross-examination.
Judge, would it be appropriate to go now, or?
Well, how long
we
is your-
didn't have a break for the,
I don't, how long is your cross-examination?
I anticipate it probably being at least as much, if not more.
Okay, all right. Ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and take our lunch break now. So we'll come back then at 1:45 to give you an hour, okay? So again, do not discuss the case and don't do any outside research, okay? We'll see you at 1:45. All right. Again, ma'am, since you're still having testimony, please do not discuss your testimony with anybody to include the prosecutors, okay? All right, thank you. See you at 1:45.
All rise.
All right, thank you. You have been watching the Brendan Banfield trial. He is on trial for murder, accused of killing his wife, Christine Banfield, and another man named Joseph Ryan. Now, he is facing multiple charges, 4 counts of aggravated murder, 1 count of using a firearm to commit a felony, 2 counts of child abuse, and 1 count of child cruelty. A lot has been happening these past few days. This is day 5 of the trial. Joining me right now, Tom Moronic Jr. and Frank Salvedo, our legal experts for today, both attorneys in the area. Let's talk about what we just saw in the last few hours. We had a blood stain splatter analysis. Tom, do you want to talk first about kind of the key takeaways here?
Well, the expert was all over the map. She would describe something as a circular pattern and then repeat that and then say she couldn't make a conclusion on it. So she just seemed very, very disparate in her analysis. And I would expect that the cross is going to attack the science of it anyway, because blood splatter analysis is not the same as DNA analysis. So I think you're going to be seeing some of that when the defense has a chance to cross.
Frank, what about for you? You know, we've only seen the defense asking the questions, mostly the prosecution butting in here and there, but really not too much. And you kind of both commented on that as well. For you, what were the takeaways here?
I think the takeaways, first of all, the defense attorney did a wonderful job at limiting some of the questions that the blood spatter expert was about to answer. But we have to remember what the prosecutor is trying to do here. What the prosecutor is doing is to try to show that it wasn't Mr. Ryan on top of Miss Banfield with the blood coming on his clothes. Rather, it was Mr. Banfield, pursuant to the au pair's testimony, on top of his wife, and the blood spatter patterns are consistent with that scenario versus how Mr. Banfield is going to portray it, that Mr. Ryan was the one doing the stabbing. So there was some awkward questioning on direct testimony, but the import of that blood spatter evidence could be really, really critical in this case, because if the blood is on Mr. Banfield and not Mr. Ryan, then the prosecutor is going to argue that he was the one actually stabbing his wife, corroborating what the au pair told the jury.
All right, so a lot of new information in all of this, a lot of new information that we will probably get in the next few hours or so. You know, the prosecution led that line of questioning. Next, we're going to hear from the defense. If you're the defense attorney here, what are the first questions you're asking this woman?
I'm going to go after some of her certifications and qualifications. I'm not going to talk about the fact that she's not allowed to ask the questions because he did not object to that. But I will talk about the science. I'll talk about where exactly she got her degrees, her information from, and then I'll talk about some of the holes in what she found. You couldn't determine this, you couldn't determine that. You said earlier you couldn't tell which stain was on top. It fits what the defense is trying to do, to find reasonable doubt, to poke holes in the state's theory of the case.
Yeah, one of the things that sticks out for me when I was listening back and thinking about what she had said was when she was asked about the sequence and if she could tell the sequence of events of when the blood hit the pants, when it hit the shoes. For you, I know you mentioned as well, that was a problem when she answered that way for the prosecution. Can you elaborate?
Yes, she batted around. She didn't go direct to the question. She went into the analysis she'd have to do to try to find the answer, and then ultimately said, in this case, no, I can't tell. So if you're a juror watching that, you're saying she doesn't know what she's talking about.
Yeah. Frank, if you're Brendan Banfield's defense attorney here, what are the first questions you have coming out of this?
Having been in his shoes many times, it looks like he has been able to eliminate some of her ultimate conclusions in the case. You see that a lot of the objections were sustained at the bench. So Mr. Carroll has to be really careful at this point. I would expect a short and punchy cross-examination, because if he opens the door to some of the information that he has excluded, some of these ultimate conclusions about where the bodies were positioned, and is that consistent with the way basically Mr. Banfield has said it, or how the au pair has said it, if he opens the door to any of that information, the prosecutor on redirect is going to open the door and run right through it. That is going to be a real problem. So I'd expect this to be a very short and punchy, something based upon her certifications, the science. I don't think he's going to touch much of the factual evidence in this case. He's done a nice job at limiting it. He doesn't want to open that door.
All right, we saw a lot of images. Obviously, this is a very gruesome case, so we do want to warn you, some of the stuff you've been seeing and will continue to see will be gruesome. One of the other things that I noticed with her is that, you know, it was confusing. It was a lot of science speak. How do you kind of translate that for the jurors so they better understand if you are the prosecution? How do you make sure that the jurors aren't walking away more confused? You want to start?
I think that what the prosecution has to do is ask more follow-up questions, and I don't think they've been doing that. So to put that in different terms, you know, Ms. Dalley Graff, can you explain what that really means? Can you give an example? And as long as she's able to sort of discuss it in a way the jury can understand, then that's fine. It does open the door to some defense objections if she goes too far, if she tries to get into beyond the scope of what's being asked. And that was one of the objections you heard from Mr. Carroll, that that's not the scope of the question. You've got to keep it to what is actually being asked. But I think the witness is describing things the jury doesn't quite understand. Okay, what's the significance of a circular pattern versus a non-circular pattern? She's not really explained that. And the jury's left wondering exactly what that means.
Yeah, and then the blood splatter, the blood smear, I think it's coming across a little confusing. Do you feel that way too, or do you think the jurors are smarter than we're talking?
Well, jurors are always way smarter than the attorneys, right? The attorneys always think they're the smartest ones in the room. Sometimes the judge thinks that, but usually it's just the attorneys. But it's actually the jurors who are the smartest ones in the room, and I think we, in the legal profession, underestimate how bright people are. In this case, slightly confusing just because of the awkwardness and the clumsiness of the direct with the objections. However, what the prosecutor, I believe, is going to do in closing is going to say, listen, if it was Mr. Ryan stabbing Miss Banfield, you would see the type of pattern on his clothing. It's not there. However, if it's Mr. Banfield stabbing his wife, you're going to see those types of patterns on his clothing. That is there. So they're going to try to tie it together in closing. They weren't quite able to do it with this witness. The judge limited them a little bit, but in closing argument, all holds are off, and I think they're going to be able to tie some of the blood spatter evidence together nicely if they can do it.
Okay. So on Thursday, the prosecution said that they only had 2 more witnesses to call. This is their first witness. We expect to hear from 1 more. We are hearing it may be a family member of Christine Banfield's, and it is expected to be emotional. Do you think that the prosecution has moved too quickly? We are on day 5, if you count jury selection as day 1. I know that's been a whole debate, but we are on day 5 of this trial, and we've already heard from the star witness by the prosecution, and now they are expected to wrap up either today or tomorrow. For you, are they moving too fast?
A little bit.
Okay.
I think that they're not explaining enough. Everything that Frank said a few minutes ago about the importance of the spatter, where it is, whose clothing it's on, the patterns, I think they need to spend a lot more time on that, because if that's going to be your big conclusion at the closing, then you've really got to get to that. And obviously the judge is going to eliminate some of the questions, keep out the questions that are leading. You've heard a lot of sustained objections on that, but there's ways around that to build a foundation, to talk about what that can mean and how you get there. And I think they're just glossing over things, and the jury might get confused.
What about for you?
It's an interesting situation because probably what the judge said in the beginning was, ladies and gentlemen, during jury selection, you're looking at about a 3 or 4 week trial. That's going to now turn into, hey, ladies and gentlemen, I think she'll probably phrase it as, we've got good news. This case is moving a lot quicker than we anticipated. Now, will the jury give the benefit of the doubt to the prosecutor and say, wow, you've got a great case and you've moved with such alacrity that the case is going to finish up soon? We really appreciate that. Or will the jury sit back and say, well, wait a second, I thought I was going to hear 2 or 3 weeks from the prosecution. Now it looks like they've cut down their evidence to what, 3 or 4 days? Like, how are they gonna take that? So it'll be interesting to see, based upon how much the prosecutor has cut down their case time-wise, will the defense also do the same? Or will the defense, if they do call a witness, will they call a bunch of witnesses to really overwhelm the prosecutor in terms of time? Very rare that the defense case takes longer than the prosecutor's case. I'm not sure what Mr. Carroll's going to do here yet. Let's see how those last couple of witnesses go. But this case is moving pretty quickly. We'll see which side that benefits.
All right, let's get back to that in a minute. We do want to get out to Matthew Torres. He is outside the courthouse for us. He has been in the courtroom all day. Matthew, I'm here with 2 of our legal experts, Tom Moronic Jr. and Frank Salvedo. But we want to ask you, we've been talking a lot about how this last witness testimony, it's been a little confusing to follow. What has been the reaction that you've seen on the faces of the jurors as this is all playing out today?
There where it looked like they were getting restless, especially right before we went on that first break, when the prosecution was really just trying to set up all the technical aspects as far as their evidence and being able to show the markings on one of the photos that this expert said on the stand. You can see they started even looking at us at one point. One of them really has been feverishly taking notes. Some of them were not. Some of them started glancing our way. And so that's kind of been consistent throughout this whole morning and part of this afternoon, especially when they go into painstaking details as far as each blood splatter, each drop, each transfer of blood. That can be somewhat confusing to follow. We can see what the prosecution is trying to argue here, that the body's removed. Allegedly, Banfield may have dropped the blood of Christine on Joseph Ryan. So all of that, we can see what they were trying to argue and trying to bring up. Of course, the ongoing objections and the judge sustaining those objections from John Carroll really has taken helm as far as today. Jurors taking notice of that as well. There was a moment when they initially showed the picture of the right arm of Joseph Ryan with the blood, the wet blood on his hands. We do know there appears to be at least one relative of his sitting in front of me, and potentially two other relatives or friends of Joseph Ryan as well. One of them kind of sat back a little bit when they first saw that picture. Of course, seeing blood like that for the first time, knowing that it belongs to potentially your friend or relative, that was a little jarring for that person. I also wrote that the judge, you could really tell when she is anticipating an objection from the defense. She's almost expecting him to object, where she's really paying attention to the line of questioning from Jenna Sands, the Deputy Commonwealth Attorney. And in doing so, she almost cocks her head a little bit and looks at Defense Attorney John Carroll, anticipating him to do that. And in doing so, it seems like that was the case. And she, in response, for the most part, have sustained a lot of his objections. And so for us, from those watching from the gallery, it was a somewhat slow start, somewhat bumpy start from the prosecution. Interestingly, you guys mentioned that this has been going very quickly, at least for the prosecutor side. Today, knowing kind of how long this has taken, it kind of slowed that progress. But as Katie mentioned there just momentarily, a relative of Christine Banfield is supposed to be the last witness for the Commonwealth. We understand it is her father who is expected to testify.
Okay, and Matthew, we've been hearing that obviously as well, but have you seen her family in the courtroom at all? I know early on you said that some of her family was there. Was her father there, her mother there the whole time?
Her mother is there the whole time with, we would presume, other relatives. So they've taken up pretty much the front bench to the left side of the courtroom. From my understanding, since the father is supposed to testify, I believe we just shared an elevator with him just coming down here. He has not been in the courtroom during this time, but as we mentioned, every time there have been a photo of a crime scene, blood that belonged to Christine, you don't really see them looking at the screens when they do show those photos to us in the gallery. They just keep their gaze, their direction, just looking straight forward during that time. But they are there, and for the most part, we see more of her family side there than Brendan Banfield or Joseph Ryan's.
All right, thank you, Matthew. And as you're looking around the courtroom, I know, on some of the days, specifically when Juliana was testifying, there were pretty large crowds there. We're not able to see into the room. Are there crowds there today? What is kind of the atmosphere like in there?
As far as the attendance, it's probably the same, maybe what we saw from Thursday. Juliana being obviously the star witness for the Commonwealth, there were more people from the public that were there. It's kind of thinned out a little bit. We see attorneys, we obviously see family members and media there as well. I would say there may be 3 to 4 people who are from the public just wanting to know what's happening. Interestingly, each day we see someone new taking notes, but certainly not as much as what we saw from the first 2 days of testimony.
Okay, Matthew, thank you. And I know you mentioned we're expecting one more witness from the prosecution. Do we know at this point how many people are still expected to testify for the defense?
Last I checked, at least just with the subpoena list that we were able to get our hands on, there were close to 70 names listed for the defense. Clearly, a lot of these names, some of them have already testified, from detectives to experts. Even the window pane guy that testified last week, they were already listed under this. So it's going to be interesting to see who they actually bring on, who they'll have for redirect. One name that also stuck out to me was one of the investigators, the head of the domestic violence division in FCPD, also dealing with juvenile-related crimes. So potentially they could be talking about the one charge related to child neglect. That is the 4-year-old child then of Christine Banfield and Brendan Banfield whenever these murders happened. So who knows how many will actually go through that, but certainly a longer list versus the Commonwealth's.
Yeah, and Matthew, that's interesting that you bring that up, because I believe we've talked a little bit about how to this point it hasn't really been clear how they're going to, get a conviction, if you will, on those charges for child abuse. We really haven't heard much about that. I would like to bring our legal analyst back into the conversation, Matthew. I don't know if you want to stick around, but, why haven't they brought up the child abuse charges to this point? Do you want to start, Frank?
Well, I think we talked about this a little bit in the beginning of the trial. There has been some testimony from the police officers that the child, I believe the child was 4 years old or so at the time, was in the basement at the time that this took place. Some interaction between the police officer and the child to make sure the child was safe. That's probably all they need to support that charge under Virginia law. Again, I think that part and parcel of bringing that charge was to, for lack of a better term, to dirty up Mr. Banfield as much as possible. Not like the charges themselves aren't terrible enough, but now the child was at the house. That is obviously the least important charge in this case. So we have heard enough under that Virginia statute for there to be a conviction. You have a child in the house when there is a double homicide committed by your parent. That's enough. I think the prosecutor isn't really going to focus too much on that. Maybe they'll call one additional officer or witness on that charge, but I would anticipate the jury, if they convict him of the murder, they're certainly going to say, listen, and your kid was there. That's just going to be an added charge.
Yeah, and I'll direct this question to you, Tom, but Matthew was talking about how he recognized one of the names on the defense's subpoena list of potential witnesses. We have a list of dozens of names, so we don't know exactly who they're going to call and who they just got cleared to be allowed to call. But he recognized one of the names as somebody who's part of the child abuse squad in some capacity. If you're the defense attorney here, why would you bring somebody up to talk about that when we haven't seen the prosecution talk about it much?
Well, you don't have to call that witness.
Okay.
You have that witness there in case the prosecution wants to bring up that issue. To what Frank said, I think it's sort of owning a steakhouse and focusing on how good your salads are. It's really that's what the prosecution's doing. They're focused on this murder charge. They're focused on that, the two charges technically, and they don't want to distract the jury. But they will hammer away that the law is met, that the standard is met, and then if the defense spends time on that, I actually don't think that's a winning strategy to focus on that when you've got to get him acquitted of murder first. But it's good to have that there in case you need it.
So probably just on standby at this point, but I guess we will see in the next few days. I do want to do a little bit of a recap for everyone tuning in. This is the trial for Brendan Banfield, and I would love if we could play some of the video of the opening statements. We're taking you back to exactly a week ago. The trial started at 10 a.m. last Tuesday, and by 10:35, they had wrapped up the opening statements. If we're able, I'd love to play you kind of a recap, some of the highlights of those opening statements.
The Commonwealth versus Brendan Banfield. Mr. Banfield's present, the courtroom is attorney, and the Commonwealth is present.
We're here today because Brendan Banfield, the man seated behind me, killed his wife, Christine Banfield, and another man named Joseph Ryan.
The murder of Christine Banfield by Joe Ryan occurred February 24th,
up the stairs to the bedroom where they hear Joe Ryan and Christine. Brenden enters the bedroom first, shooting Joe in the head, picks up the knife that Joe had brought, and stabs Christine repeatedly in the neck. He directs Juliana to shoot Joe a second time with her gun. Brenden spends the next several minutes manipulating Joe Ryan's body, in the process leaving Christine's blood on Joe's hands and pants.
The arrest of Juliana Peres Magalhães took place in October of 2023. And the whole reason she was arrested was to flip her against my client. You won't hear any dispute as to the relationship between Brendan Banfield and Juliana Peres Magalhães. But there's an awful lot more to look for, ladies and gentlemen.
The blood puts Brendan Banfield standing over Christine, stabbing her in the neck until she died. Well, Juliana presents us with the narrative. It is the blood evidence that you can rely upon without a doubt.
Digital forensics doesn't lie. People lie. And there are going to be plenty to see.
All right, so those were the opening statements, the highlights, if you will. It was only 30 minutes total between the two of them. I'd like to start with you, Tom. We talked about this last week quite a bit. Tom, were you surprised at how quickly they got through those opening statements?
I think when you do opening statements, you want to lay a roadmap. You don't want to put your whole case out. You simply want to lay a map of what you intend to prove if you're the prosecution and if you're defense. Start poking holes at your theory, why your theory of the case will poke holes at the prosecution's theory. So I think that was probably what they wanted to do on both sides. The prosecution had a goal in mind, and it's to start dirtying the image of Brendan Banfield. And that's exactly what they were doing. They talked about the affair. They talked about how this was plotted. They talked about how all the dots will connect. And then the defense said, there's lots of holes to this, and they rely on witnesses you can't trust and science you can't trust. So I think that both sides sort of staked their claim to what they intended to do in the trial.